My name's Tom Fate. I teach creative writing here at the college. On behalf of the Creative Writing Committee and the Division of Liberal Arts who funds this series, I want to welcome you and thank you for coming. We have 1, 2, 3 writers here every semester as part of a series called the Writers Read Series, and that's what this is. For me, being able to sit down with a group of people, class, reading group, or anything, and read a book and talk about it, and have a good discussion, and then have the writer come in and talk with you or with us and continue the conversation is about as good as it gets in terms of how college works. So I'm really happy for evenings like tonight. It's my pleasure to now introduce Leigh Stein, who we're really happy has returned to her alma mater to share with us some recent work. Leigh grew up in Lombard and is a former student, and one of her former teachers is here, Freda Libman, which we're excited about. Leigh currently lives in Brooklyn, where she writes and teaches drama to children. She's a former staffer on the New Yorker magazine and the author of 2 books, both published this year. The first is a novel called The Fallback Plan, which a lot of you have read, and which received critical acclaim. And the other is a collection of poetry called Dispatch from the Future. And she'll be reading from both of these books this evening. So please join me in welcoming Leigh Stein.
Hi everyone, I'm so excited to be here at COD. I loved COD. I dropped out of high school because I hated high school so much, and I came to COD and I was very happy, so whatever works. Thank you to Tom for organizing everything, and for all of you who've come. I'm going to read from a few different projects tonight, and I was trying to think of a way to unify everything, and so I decided to talk about sources. Where do ideas come from? How do I know what I want to write about? That sort of thing. And for me, I always felt like I was a poet, and I started writing poetry when I was 13, and poems would just come to me like music, and I would just write them down. And my first book of poetry just came out, but my dark secret is that I haven't really heard a poem in 2 years, and it felt really strange to lose this part of myself. And so I tried thinking, how could I trick myself into writing poetry again? So I was thinking, what do I really love? And I really love reality TV shows. So I'm going to read to you some poems that I wrote based on reality TV shows. So what I do, my process, is I watch TV, and I write down everything that they say that I like, and then I collage it into poetry. And it ends up being kind of funny and kind of profound at the same time. So you can try this at home. This is Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, my favorite version of the Real Housewives. And the episode was called Life, Liberty, and the Pursuit of Wealthiness. I thought I had a stroke, but it was my false eyelashes. It's a land of make-believe. It can be brutal at times. Growing up in extreme wealth, you have to sometimes be careful. I live in a gated community. I have 4 nannies, and they rotate. It's so romantic. I feel that this is an opportunity for me to show that I'm my own person. It may look like I have it all, but I want more. I'm a dancer, and I have been my whole life. I'd rather be happy than right. And this is The Bachelor season with Brad. If you're laughing, I know you watched it. Okay. Brad and the remaining women travel to Anguilla, is the name of the episode. This pool party is beyond difficult. I think there's going to be a lot of devastation. I've picked up women in helicopters, but now I'm more confused than ever. There's just no romance. We're going to be cliff jumping. This is the ideal scenario for a guy to tell a girl how he's feeling. The water is so, so blue. We're losing the sun, and we're gaining the moon. Isn't Brad so romantic? He's so romantic. Okay, this is my favorite episode title of all. Brad and a date get closer while at a private carnival. When Ashley and I were running through the carnival, I just kept seeing how she was smiling. Ashley has absolutely no clue where we're going. Redemption? I don't need that. I don't need redemption. I will not have you, like, obstruct the rest of my life. How old are we? We're going so far over the top. I definitely feel my most beautiful right now. I want to see if we can laugh, be ourselves. I don't know if you got the memo, but it's my birthday. I think we should now be using the word nightmare. Let's see. Maybe I'll switch a little bit. This poem was written from this poet. There's this poet named Josh Bell, who I love, and he came up with a recipe for a love poem. So you have to do all these instructions, which was very helpful to me because I felt like I couldn't write poems and I needed someone to give me a recipe for a poem. So I'll read you the recipe, and then I'll read you the actual poem that I wrote, which is inspired by the Hunger Games, which I hope is relevant to this crowd. Yes, the Hunger Games? Okay. Josh Bell's recipe for a love poem. 1, simile, fill in the blank. I love you like. 2, make up a fake quote about love and attribute it to someone famous, living or dead. For example, Richard Nixon once said that love is for suckers. 3, agree or disagree with that fake quote and state your reasons. 4, set the poem and give an action. Here in this, I am. 5, name the beloved and then give them the name they should have been given, stating your reasons for that name change. 6, give one simile referencing the body of the beloved. No cliches. 7, one simile describing space, planets, or sky. No cliches. 8, scold the beloved for some human behavior, but as if scolding a pet. 9, remember a past time with the beloved using at least one evocative sense, sight, sound, touch, etc., image. 10, claim to not being afraid of something you should be afraid of, and then admit to being afraid of something people usually aren't afraid of. 11, another simile referencing the body of the beloved. 12, metaphor about the self. I am a, because I am. 13, repeat a misheard song lyric as if it is correct. For instance, the lyric, I won't give up until I'm satisfied, misheard as, I won't give up until I'm sanitized. 14, make up a bit of questionable advice your mother, father, grandmother, friend, etc. once gave you. 15, close by either A, making a promise to the beloved which is impossible to keep, or B, making a promise to the beloved would not want you to keep. So now here is my poem from Katniss to Peeta using Josh Bell's recipe for a love poem. Simile, fill in the blank. I love you like I love burn cream when I'm the girl on fire. Clarissa explained it all to me when she said that if Suzanne Collins knew then how much money she would have now, she would do it all over again, which sounds a lot like love. Love is as love does, is something I wrote on a Wyndham Hotel notepad for no reason. Love is an extremely creative, abusive mother who beats you with loaves of bread until you forget your own name. Sound familiar? Here I am now in this death arena, missing your touch. Even your name makes me think of bread. Your eyes are like the hungriest marbles, your hands the hungriest stars. Stop looking at me like we'll never get out of here alive. I'm not afraid of death. I'm afraid of losing everyone I love and being the only one left to sing to the mockingjays. Peeta, your eyes are like a huge diaspora. I'm so good at archery because fuck you. Werewolves in London sounds too much like where was your thunder? I harnessed my thunder and took it to the cornucopia. My mother once told me to stop being such a badass, as if I could ever stop. Peeta Malark, you are my beloved, the arrow that flies from my bow. Thank you. Next, I will read from my novel, The Fallback Plan. I went to a conference and I heard the writer Rebecca Skloot, who wrote The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, some of you might have read, and she was talking about writing advice, and she said, you know, a lot of college students, they're in college and they're writing, and they're like, what do I want to write about? What's happening to me right now? My roommate, I hate my roommate, I'm going to write about my roommate. But she was saying, instead of writing about what's happening to you right now, go back to high school and or younger, and what was that thing that you were obsessed with? And for her, she loved science classes, and so she's become a science writer. But it's like everyone has this thing that, like, you know, when they were 12 years old, they were obsessed with Star Wars or something, and it really drives you, I think, to write. And I think for me, this book is about a young woman who moves back home with her parents after college and takes a babysitting job. And babysitting is something I've done since I was 12 years old. When I started, I made $2.50 an hour. I remember that. And I love being with kids, and I really wanted to write about a babysitter, and that was what was really driving me. And the fact that my main character lived with her parents, to me, that was like a way to start the story. I just lived at home with my parents. I just wanted to start the book there. But now that it's come out, I started it in 2007, and now that it's come out, so when I tell people what the plot is, they're like, oh, I know someone who lives with their parents. You know, it's become this big thing, but it wasn't what I set out to write because I can't see into the future, as though I wish I could see into the future. The first chapter is about my hometown. It's called The Lilac Capital of the World. In June, the monsoons hit Bangladesh. Chinese police discovered slaves in a brickwork factory who couldn't be sent home because they were too traumatized to remember anything but their own names, and Dr. Kevorkian was released from prison. In other news, I moved in with my parents. I had somehow managed to graduate with a theater degree from Northwestern, but without a job or a trust fund, I had to choose between moving home and suffering the rancid fate of a nomadic couch surfer. This hadn't been anyone's original plan, and somewhere in the gap between the end of winter break and graduation, my parents had converted my childhood bedroom into a home theater. No one had mentioned it to me. They assumed I'd be just as thrilled as they were. They took down my map of the world, my kitschy chandelier, and the panel of Gustav Klimt wallpaper I had pasted above my bed. I smoothed all those air bubbles out with a sponge, by hand, I told my mom when I saw what she'd done. The room was now nautical themed. The new wallpaper looked benign enough from far away, but if you got up close, you saw that it was patterned with cats wearing sailor caps. A small part of me threw up. There was a leather couch where my bed had been, and the shelves above held my parents' DVD collection, which consisted of romantic comedies from the early 90s and the Chuck Norris omnibus. Did you think I would never come home, I said. Remember what you said when you were 14 or 15? You said that once you graduated college, you'd rather live in a car than live with us, she said, and left me alone in that room to grieve for lost objects. I was kidding, I called after her, but she didn't come back. I didn't even own a car. I briefly imagined moving back to Evanston, walking to the lake, and throwing myself in. But how would I even get back to Evanston without a car? I moved my clothes and books into the guest room downstairs, which smelled like pumpkin spice potpourri year-round, and was very close to the tree where the cicadas screamed at night. Was I jealous that Jack Kevorkian was free and I was not? Yes. Yes, I was. And so began my summer as an unemployed college graduate. My goal was to develop a chronic illness that would entitle me to monthly checks from the government, tender sympathy from my loved ones, and a good deal of time in bed with the collected work of Frances Hodgson Burnett. I've always been ambitious. I had my fingers crossed for a disease without a cure, but a mild one, nothing disfiguring or painful. Of all the plans I could have made for how to spend the rest of my life, this seemed the most desirable because it required the least of me. It was a form of surrender. My dad subscribed to Time and Newsweek, in addition to the Chicago Tribune, and he read on the train on the way to work. He read in his favorite armchair with a glass of Cabernet before dinner. He read in the bathroom. I didn't think this was just a healthy interest in current events. I recognized this as an addiction because it was one I shared. Around our house, the paranoia and sense of impending doom was escalating until finally the day came when my dad told me that he was going to have to start charging me rent to offset the cost of the home security system he had just ordered. But you just turned my childhood bedroom into a cineplex, I said. It increases the value of the home, my mom said. But I don't have any money, remember? That's why I live with you. I had applied at Petco and Starbucks, but neither was hiring, so I made flyers to advertise my services as a dog walker. They remained in a stack on my desk. Whenever I looked at them, I either got lost in an invalid fantasy, or I thought, Jesus, Esther, you were tested as gifted and talented in first grade. You were a lilac princess in the Lilac Parade, and you starred in a student film called Russian Bride Zombies from Hell. You shouldn't have to walk dogs or suffer from rheumatoid arthritis. Sofia Coppola should hire you as her personal assistant. You should get paid to update her website or remember to bring a bag of her favorite snack foods when you two have to fly to international film festivals together. Esther, did you hear what I just said? My mom said. What? I said, do you want to help me plant wildflowers in the front? I'll pay you $8 an hour. If by plant wildflowers you mean inherit $100,000 from a dead relative I've never met so that I can visit the catacombs in Paris, then yes, I said. My friend Tierney was abroad for the summer on a trip financed by her grandmother as a graduation present. The last email she'd sent me was from Paris. The subject read, Beaucoup de garçons. Maybe you can get a job at the movie theater at the mall, and you can see movies for free, my dad said. You like movies. He was making signs on our computer to print and post around the house that reminded me and my mom to lock the doors and windows. How do I make the text all fit on one page? Do I click this white box with the magnifying glass? No, I said, stop, let me do it. It only took 2 seconds, and he kept asking me to slow down so he could see what I was doing. I knew he wouldn't remember it anyway, so I didn't. The survivors of this are sitting in the front row tonight. Isn't that something, my mom said, putting on her reading glasses to watch over our shoulders. Can you at least write down what you just did so I can do it again later if you're not home, my dad said. Maybe we could pay her to give us computer lessons, Paul. You don't have to pay me, I'll write them down later. Dad, can I borrow the car tonight? If you put on some pants, he said. I looked at my legs. I was only wearing the t-shirt I had worn to bed the night before. On the front, it had a picture of a gray wolf standing on a cliff, howling at a full moon. The moon was surrounded by silvery clouds coming out of a ghost-like woman's mouth. This was my so ugly it's awesome shirt, but my parents didn't appreciate that, even after I explained it to them. I poured myself a bowl of Cinnamon Toast Crunch for dinner and took it to my room so I wouldn't have to sit at the table with my parents and talk about my plans. I had been rereading the books I loved as a child, mysteries and fantasies, books in which the heroines were orphans or runaways or Holocaust martyrs. I liked that even though they faced insurmountable obstacles, their objectives were always clear. Cereal in hand, I got into bed with The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. 30 pages in, I started to fall asleep, but I had promised to hang out with my friend Pickle later, so to stay awake, I brought my laptop over from my desk and Googled images of baby pandas. Baby panda waving, baby panda at the playground, baby panda in a blue plastic basket. I should write a screenplay, I thought, about 4 baby pandas who go to stay with their uncle in the English countryside to hide from German bombers. One day they're playing hide-and-go-seek when the littlest panda finds this amazing portal to another world, but the other baby pandas don't believe her, and later they're filled with regret, because in the other world she enters into an indecent relationship with a much older panda, and they don't know how to bring her back. I'll do that, I thought. Later, I'll write a screenplay. I read an email from Shimon in Connecticut, who said she was having a fantastic time stage managing a production of Equus and was sleeping with an actor who played one of the horses. Melissa wrote to say she had decided to stay in Evanston for the summer and also wanted to let me know that her teenage brother got caught doing coke at space camp. All my girlfriends were having the times of their lives, like Jennifer Gray, pre-rhinoplasty. I took a Vicodin I found in the medicine cabinet, left over from when I had my wisdom teeth out, and tried to tame the wild shrubbery of my hair with gelatinous goop. 20 minutes later, I looked less Diana Ross, more mangy dog, a failure. I went back into the guest room and crawled around the floor of the closet, which was now filled with the salvaged wreckage of my former bedroom, looking for my favorite black shirt. It felt cool and dark in there, like the bottom of the ocean. I found a stack of Trapper Keepers from middle school, a pair of pink leg warmers, my collection of Little House on the Prairie and Beatrix Potter books, and a box of 64 crayons. I found the shirt and changed into it. Pants next. Then my phone made a noise and I crawled back to my bed to get it. There was a text message from Pickle that said he was off work and going over to Jack's and I should meet them. "Kay," I wrote back. But then, instead of standing up, I decided to see how long I could keep crawling. What if you couldn't walk, Esther? I thought. What if that was your affliction? I kneeled to turn off the light in my room, and then I crawled into the hallway, through the living room, and toward the front door. My dad was asleep on the couch with the TV on mute. Why did we own so many TVs? I couldn't understand it. I had to crawl past him to get to the staircase where my purse was hanging over the banister, and I pretended I was a sand cat in the desert, stealthily hunting for lizards in the dark. Esther? My mom was standing at the top of the stairs, flossing her teeth. Yes? Are you going out? I dropped something, I said. I think I dropped something. Okay, be safe, she said. Do you have your keys? Be sure to lock behind you, my dad said, opening and closing his eyes like garage doors. He turned off the TV and resealed the bag of cookies on the coffee table. I stood and let myself out. Across the street, dusk was falling to the west behind the gas plant. Down came the first stars. The world seemed so safe and secure, but I knew that at any moment an asteroid could fall on us, or a bomb, summoned by our fear of it, and it wouldn't matter if we had locked our doors or not. Thousands of miles away, a bus could explode and destroy a mosque and a tourist from San Diego. A polar bear could drown, and a teenage girl could lose her feet in a roller coaster accident on the same exact day. You always heard people say, I never thought it would happen to me, so my strategy was to think of it all. Terrorist attack, amusement park dismemberment, death by climate change, and use my grim imagination as a preventative measure in the face of the random universe. I kicked a cicada shell to the side of the driveway with my sandal and got in the car. The radio was playing that song about the guy who would walk 1,000 miles across the country for the girl. Everyone loved that song. I would put it on the Littlest Panda soundtrack. When I backed out of the driveway, I wasn't paying attention to what I was doing. I was looking at the moths near our porch light. For a second, I thought they were snowflakes in June, and then I ran over the curb a little bit. I could see my dad at the window near the front door. I waved, he shook his head. I turned off the radio and drove west into the silent, encroaching darkness. So, funny anecdote, maybe funny only to me, but the song that's playing on the radio about the guy who'd walk 1,000 miles for the girl, when I was writing this, Hey There Delilah was on the radio all the time, and that's the song I meant. And my boyfriend, who's come to like 1 million of my readings and now has this memorized because he's very supportive, he was like, oh, it's that I would walk 500 miles. And I was like, that's not the song I meant. He's like, everyone is going to think that's the song you meant. I was like, oh, God, but it doesn't matter. So Esther is pathetic for the first chapter, and then she gets a babysitting job for a neighboring family. Her parents hook her up with this babysitting job for the Brown family, and they have a 4-year-old daughter named May, and they've also just recently lost a baby, so they're dealing with their grief, and Esther is thrown into this family caring for this 4-year-old. So I'm going to read one more section from the book. It's shorter. And Esther continues with her Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe panda fantasy by telling the 4-year-old the whole plot of the books starring pandas. That's how they're bonding together. So that's what the beginning of this is. The littlest panda puts on a cloche hat and climbs inside the armoire in which she found it. She can hear her brother running in the hallway, opening every door. She knows she has found the best hiding place and does a little dance. Then she touches the hat in the darkness, imagining how beautiful she must look. If only there were a mirror, she thinks. She knows where there is one and is tempted to leave the armoire, but she also knows that if she leaves, her brother will find her. Little does she know that her brother has given up the game. He doesn't want to play anymore. He wants to go downstairs and make a veggie burger, and then maybe go for a row around the misty lake with his 2 older siblings. The 4 panda children are staying with their uncle, and he is never home. He leaves them notes on the table in the foyer, written in a language that they don't understand. They often wonder if the notes explain why they are pandas and he is not. Whenever the pandas feel hungry, they go to the kitchen, and the refrigerator is mysteriously restocked with groceries from Whole Foods. Still in the armoire, the young panda doesn't hear her brother's footsteps anymore. She holds her breath. She closes her eyes. She feels something delicate and cold on her cheek, something both foreign and familiar. Where could it have come from, she wonders. She spins around inside the closet, looking for the exit, but gets caught in the trains of dozens of haute couture gowns, and before she knows it, all the walls have vanished, the gowns have turned into furs, the furs into trees with snow-laden boughs, and then she feels the flush of winter on her face, as though she has just entered the most wonderful dream. This would all happen before the opening credits, I told May. What's an armoire? May tilted her head to the side. A closet. Can I tell you something? Sure, what? Why is it snowing in that closet? I'll tell you when you're older, I said, and pulled on one of her pigtails to bring her head back. She laughed. We were in the backyard, weaving crowns from white clover. We had made one for every girl we knew, and then we made bracelets and necklaces and rings. Once I'd realized that to be a good babysitter, I only had to be willing to behave like a 4-year-old, but with a keener eye for potential dangers, I liked my new job very much. This was the first time May and I were alone together. Every 5 minutes, she became nervous and asked if we could go back inside to give the Clover jewelry to her mom. But I knew Amy was busy doing something in the attic because I caught sight of her face every now and then, keeping an eye on us from the diamond-shaped window near the peak of the roof. I didn't let May know that her mom was watching us. Should we walk to the park? I said. No. Why? Because. Should we make juice popsicles and eat them while we draw on the sidewalk with chalk? No, May said. Can I eat this? She held up a single bunch of clover. I wasn't sure if you were supposed to eat clover, but I remembered eating it when I was little, and didn't horses like it? Yeah, sure, go for it. I watched her chew. Do you want to hijack a plane and fill it with Swedish fish like a big piñata and fly over countries where they don't have big, clean drinking water and make little boys and girls happy? No, May said, it's too hot. What if you were an Eskimo, though? I said. Think about that for a quick sec. Do you think Eskimos would complain about it being too hot? May thought about it. No, she decided. The Eskimos probably go inside their closets when it's hot. I couldn't argue with the logic of that. Let's make snow angels in the grass, I said, and she blinked at me, watched to see what I'd do so she could decide whether or not to copy. I wondered if May remembered the previous winter, if she associated the loss of her sister with snow, icicle waterfalls flowing from gutters, the feeling of damp boots when you've stayed out for too long. And if she did remember, I wondered how long it would be before she forgot. I hardly remember anything that happened before I was 8 or 9. A carousel ride near a one-room schoolhouse, cutting my lip on the sidewalk, my old strawberry shortcake lunchbox with my name on the inside in black permanent marker. My mom had let me write my first name, and she had written my last. The letters in Esther overlapped and twisted like morning glory vines, beside a Kohler in all caps, in the clean hand of a biologist, the name of my species. I've heard that only children remember less than children with siblings do, because we have no one with whom to corroborate our memories. I've had to appropriate my parents' memories of my childhood, their stories, true or not, because sometimes when I see old photos of myself, I don't quite believe that's who I was. What appear to be the happiest years of my life in photo albums are the years most missing in my memory. That girl could be anyone. She could be the girl that came with the picture frame. She could be anyone's daughter running along the beach. Remember this, I wanted to tell May, as I watched her short fingers twist clover stems. Now she was an only child too. Try to stay the sage forever, but if you can't, at least remember everything. I lay on my back and closed my eyes against the sun and moved my arms through the grass like wings, imagining the blades were feathers. May joined me. Ooh, she whispered. Does that feel good? Ooh, she said again. Ooh, I said. I looked over, and her eyes were still closed. Ooh is the sound of the snow, she said. Thank you. Now we're back to poetry. I think I'll start with this poem. I found a poem that I wrote at COD in Freda Libman's class. I think the assignment was to write gratitude poems, to write poems about something you were thankful for. And to me, my anxiety is when I buy a card to send to someone for their birthday or to thank them, they know that I'm a writer, and so the pressure is so intense to like write the best thing. And you also can't just get them like the store card because they'll be like, why did they give me this? And they didn't write their own. So like, I feel a lot of pressure. So that's what I wrote my poem about. Gratitude. To think of gratitude and to think of thank you cards instead. The small panic of them. The pressure to buy the ones with black and white Parisian photograph covers and the blank insides, ready for your profound message. You writer, you beautiful liar, you are supposed to be good at this. So you write, thank you for the flowers. I don't know what to call them, but they are pink, and I plan on taking them to bed with me in your absence. You write, thank you for the reminder you're 800 miles away. You draw pictures of hot air balloons and trolley cars and inaccurate maps of the United States with dashed arrow routes that point from one stick person holding flowers to another stick person empty-handed. And when it is too hard to be thankful for anything, other than the fact that at least the two of you aren't dead yet, you call, despite the time zone difference and impossible hour, to say, walk west so that I can hear your footsteps better. So you all can decide if my work got better after that or declined. That'll be up to you. In the 90s, I loved playing this game called the Oregon Trail on a computer. Anyone else play that game? Yes, yes. And you loaded up your Conestoga wagon and you went west, and along the way you could shoot bison to feed your family, and if your family died, you buried them and you wrote little things on their gravestones. And you could also, it's not morbid, it's really fun. You could also keep a diary along the way of your trip, so that's what inspired this poem. This is a diary. June 14th, 1848. Weather, hot. Health, fair. Dear diary, had to leave the baby behind because she wouldn't eat. Sent John out to shoot a buffalo, but he said they all looked so peaceful he couldn't bring himself to do it. Figures, we'll all be dead soon enough. Waiting for the Indian to get here so we can cross the river. June 15th, 1848. Weather, still hot. Health, same. Dear diary, Chastity's doll drowned. She wanted to dive in after it, but I reminded her that she doesn't know how to swim. Dove in anyway. Another one lost. John says he'll skin us a buffalo so we have something to eat, but only if the buffalo has recently died of natural causes. Get a grip, John, I told him. June 16th, wagon broke. Eating wild blackberries while we wait for another wagon party to come by and help. John has gone off on his own to meditate and ask forgiveness of the earth. Prudence might have dysentery, figures. June 17th. Some days I feel like I'm just a character in a game played by a sick person who has sent me on this journey only to kill all my loved ones along the way. June 18th. Help came, but in the night they stole our oxen. Guess we'll just have to walk to Oregon now. Are you there, God? It's me, Mary Jane. Send me some oxen and a son who likes to shoot things. June 19th. Lost Prudence to dysentery. Should we eat her? Tough question. June 20th. Another river, you have got to be kidding. June 21st. Managed to swim across with diary on top of my head so it wouldn't get wet. John and I have found a tribe of Indians who will let us stay with them. At least, we think that's what they said. We don't speak their language. They seem to have indicated that tonight we must follow them, blindfolded, into a grove of trees, and in the addled darkness, our dead will return and speak to us. Yeah. My favorite compliment I've ever gotten on my poems is someone told me that it's like I'm doing a puppet show and I like distract you and then I stab you. It's funny. Oh, my mom thinks that's morbid. Okay. So morbid. Okay, non-morbid poem. Let's see. Well, this will be fun. I wrote a bunch of poems inspired by either movies or fairy tales, and sometimes both. So this is a mashup of Risky Business, starring Tom Cruise, and The Robber Bridegroom, which is a Grimm fairy tale. Grimm, like G-R-I-M-M, also G-R-I-M. The Forbidden Chamber. There are things you do when left alone you wouldn't otherwise do, like leave the house without your phone, or marry someone you'll wish would leave you later, or throw a party like in the ancient legend of the call girl who falls in love with a Fabergé egg instead of her young employer. In this tale, she steals it from the mantel of his Glencoe mansion and carries it in her smooth white hands while she looks for hidden rooms to enter. It is apparent how anyone could love her forever if she didn't cost his parents so much money. I'll be late for school, the guy says. Please be gone when I get home. There are things you can do if you look like Rebecca de Mornay, including do whatever you want, which means stumbling upon a room she shouldn't ever see, where the master of the house keeps an armoire full of limbs of all the girls that came before her, and she drops the egg, which doesn't shatter, but then the blood won't come off. And what is she supposed to do? He'll kill her too. No matter what she does, he'll kill her too. And this is not only true of legends, but also true of life. If you're pretty, if you go where you're not supposed to, looking for things not meant for your eyes, then you will have to explain the blood on your hands somehow, or else have a few brothers to break down the door when you are kneeling on an expensive rug someday and there is a famous movie star standing above you with a great big knife. Ooh. Maybe I'll read a couple more. Oh, I also wrote poems for this book inspired by the Choose Your Own Adventure books, which you would go on an adventure, like to say Mars or something, and then things would happen like, do you abandon your spacecraft or you stay and help your team, turn to page, blah, 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 and then you turn to the page and you usually die and then you'd read the book again and try to live. So this poem's inspired by that, and also a movie that some of you ladies might have seen, but I'll let you try to figure out which movie it is, and then I'll tell you at the end. Based on a book of the same title. By definition of vicious infinite regression, I don't like to talk to philosophy majors. They have found the truth, and the truth is that there isn't one. So on Saturdays, they wear overalls and stare at their reflections and try to guess whose childhood was worse. But in the end, they realize they all share the same dream of having a reason to join the Witness Protection Program, which disappoints at least one person who thought his dream was so uniquely his. Last night, I got a fortune cookie that said I don't get along with basically anyone. And from the back, I learned the Chinese word for grape, pu tao, and it made me wonder how each informs the other. To find out, turn to page 117. I wonder how much longer I can live here before I do something irresponsible, like meet a teenage boy on a Ferris wheel in 1941, or lie in the street and watch the stoplights change from green to yellow, or sit on a porch swing at dusk and listen to Leaves of Grass read by someone who has just worked all day with his hands. Already, on page 56, I love you so much, I just want to steal your clothes when you're asleep and wash them. I want us to communicate telepathically until I am old and suffering from dementia and can't even remember I know how to play piano, until a nurse tells me I do, and still I'll deny it, until she puts my hands on the keys, and then there'll be Chopin so quickly as the light spills in the leaded windows and the lilies leaning closer. By definition of vicious infinite regression, I am in front of a mirror holding a copy of the movie based on the book you wrote, based on the parts of our life together that I no longer remember. And looking back at me is a woman holding a movie based on a book based on her life, and she wonders if the woman she sees wants to die as much as she does. I keep staring at this bruise on my leg and drawing a blank. Last night when you called, I told you I was happy, which was true, but thinking ahead, I could be unhappy too, if that's what you wanted. I could be any of a lot of things, a wrist, a ghost, a harbor, a rope. I could be the one who doesn't know the language. I could be the reason they take you first. I could be the last person to see you alive. The Notebook, anyone? Oh, thank you. It's very funny because I don't realize that there's a lot of death in my poems until I'm reading them to a large audience, and then I'm like, oh, that person died, didn't they? Okay, I'm gonna read, I think, one more of my poems, and I'm gonna read one poem from this book because it inspired I wrote a whole series of poems. They're all called Dispatch from the Future, and that's why the book is called that. And this poet, Mattia Harvey, did this project around, I think, the start of the Iraq War called The Future of Terror and Terror of the Future, where she looked at a dictionary and she wrote down every word that came between future, starting with an F, and terror, starting with a T, and those were her word lists, and then she wrote poems based on that. So I'm gonna read The Future of Terror number 11. So she starts with an F word and she's going towards T words. So you can kind of follow it alphabetically, and I love these poems. I don't even know what they're about. It's more like I love them for the sound than for what they're about, but they really inspired the poems I wrote in this, so I'll just read this one. The Future of Terror 11. From the gable window, we shot at what was left, gargoyles and garden gnomes. I accidentally shot the generator, which would have been hard to gloss over in a report, except we weren't writing reports anymore. We ate our gruel and watched the hail crush the hay we'd hoped to harvest. I found a handkerchief drying on a hook, and without a hint of irony, pocketed it. Here was my hypothesis. We were inextricably fucked. We'd killed all the inventors and all the jesters just when we most needed humor and invention. The lake breeze was lugubrious at best, couldn't lift the leaves. As the day lengthened, we knew we'd reached the lattermost moment. The airlift wasn't on its way. Make-believe was all I had left, but I couldn't help but see there was no we. You were a mannequin, and I'd been flying solo. I thought about how birds can turn around midair, how the nudibranch has no notion it might need a shell. Swell. I ate the last Napoleon. It said onward on the packaging. There was one shot left in my rifle. I polished my plimsolls. I wrapped myself in a quilt. So this is how you live in the present. Isn't that so good? That's so good. Okay. So then I wrote these poems that are just about what I imagine what this voice imagines the future to be. I don't know if that makes sense. I think I'll read the last poem in the book. Dispatch from the future. Yes, I am writing to you from there. Yes, in the future we have excitement. Also, a forgiveness economy. All IOUs are tied to balloon strings and released into the atmosphere in an environmentally responsible way. Lunch is free for everybody. Lunch is peanut butter sandwiches sliced on the diagonal by mothers. We are sparkly. Everything is pleasure, but we are also acutely empathetic like children. When one starts crying, another answers. A fugue state. We are sparkly, but we also remember what it was like before we were. We can relate to our past selves, dull like mercury, alluvial soil, just after the earthquake. It's hard to know which disaster to expect, yet no one ever thinks, I don't want to do anything except sleep forever, maybe. Yes, in the future, we are prepared for what we cannot prepare for. We are sparkly for a reason. Our country depends on us for a kind of warning entertainment. In the future, we never make pilgrimages to disaster sites. We lay flowers on the brows of the living. Thank you. So the hard part is over. I'm happy to answer any questions about writing, about Oregon Trail, about Hey There, Delilah. Yes?
In the Fallback Plan, I actually, before the end of the first chapter, I had to look at your name again to make sure your name wasn't Esther. It seems very realistic. How much was from truth, how much not?
He asked how much of my novel is from truth and how much is not. It's a good question because when the book came out in January, everyone said, is this autobiographical? And I said, yeah, kind of autobiographical. And by that I meant, like, I'm a lot like Esther. But then I realized that some people took that to mean everything in the book happened to me and I just wrote it down, which nothing in the book happened to me. But I think the way Esther is thinking in her mind is the way I was thinking when I was 22 when I was writing it. And her kind of thought processes and her kind of dark sense of humor is very me. So I think people can't help but like look at the picture on the back and be like, and I do the same thing. I always want to know, like, I'm always looking for the autobiography in novels. I think that's a fun thing to do. So yeah.
Very well written.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes.
What made you decide to become a writer exactly?
What made me decide to become a writer? Well, I wanted to be an actress, and that was my dream. And I was in a play at COD. I was in all the plays in high school, and I moved to New York to go to acting school. And while I was in acting school, I was cast in all these dramatic love scenes, and I was like crying every day. It was like go to school and cry for 4 hours. And I would just come home to my dorm room and write short stories and post them on my blog as like therapy. And I was like, oh, a writer is a thing you can do? It was like, oh, it was like a light bulb. And so I didn't go back to my second year of acting school, and I just started writing. And I feel like the instinct comes from a similar place because I'm making characters and I'm kind of directing them, but I get to do it at home in my pajamas by myself, which is where I want to be a lot of the time. Yes?
Does your mom or your dad write more?
Does my mom or my dad write more?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good question. My dad writes the best cards. He writes, every card he gives you, he collects cards, and then it makes you cry no matter what he writes. But my mom is the one that if you write an essay and you need help, you go to my mom. So different kinds of writing, I think. Yes?
envision what the whole plot was ahead of time, or did you just write it as it came to you?
Did I envision the whole plot, or did I write it as it came? I definitely wrote it as it came. I thought, oh, this is actually funny, because in high school, I never really had a high school English teacher that really like turned me on to writing or books. I'd always been a reader, but I didn't have a high school teacher that inspired much of anything. And I remember in junior year, I asked, like very earnestly, like, do you think writers know the end when they start? And she was like, of course they do. And I was just like, no, they don't. Like, I was just like, that can't be true. I'm being lied to. But when I started my novel, I thought I should have an outline, and I had all these index cards with like years things happen and months things happen, and I was like putting it all on the dining room table, and then I was just like, that isn't the way I work. So I just wrote it as it came, and then I was writing it in New Mexico. I didn't finish it, but I wrote most of it, and then it's a long story. I ended up in New York. The book wasn't finished yet. An agent contacted me because I kept a blog, and she said, I heard you're writing a novel. She liked my poetry. She's like, I heard you're writing a novel. Can you send it to me? Can you send me 50 pages and a synopsis, which means a synopsis of the whole book? And so I was like, yeah, no problem. And then I was like, all right, I have to make up the ending right now. And so I was like, there's going to be a rainstorm, and the characters are going to learn all these lessons about life and love. It was just whatever, over the top. But I sent it to her, and she was like, this is good. Keep going. I'll read it when it's finished. And, of course, the ending wasn't anything like I said. But you just know. I think, like, an ending, whether it's a poem or the novel, it was like a feeling. Like it's like a physical sensation. You're like, that's the ending that I was looking for. And for those of you who've read the book, there's like a drawing that's at the end, in the end scene. And once I wrote that drawing, I knew, I just felt like, oh. And it's funny because the drawing is by the 4-year-old character May, and May, I have no memory of writing May whatsoever. All the other characters are loosely based on people I've known, and the 4-year-old like took over the book. Everyone is like, Esther was okay, but the 4-year-old was my favorite character. I'm like, yeah, I know, 'cause, thanks a lot. But yeah, but May was really wonderful, and I don't know where she came from, and she like finished the book for me. So thanks. Yes?
What did the panda story mean to you?
What, like, where did the panda story come from?
Yeah, what is it that you wanted to say with it?
What did I want to say with it? Well, at first, it was just the fun part to write. So when I was stuck on the other parts, I would be like, okay, self, you can have a few minutes and write some pandas and then get back to the real stuff. And then later in the book, I was like, well, this has to come together. Like, it can't just be my fun part, you know? So for me, the panda part is Esther trying to reconcile her childhood and her adulthood and letting go of her childhood, that she can still, you know, love children and love the books she loved then, but she's got to move on. And so I tried to use the pandas to kind of illustrate that in a surreal, magical way as she was living her real life and going along. Yes?
Did you struggle at all with the decision to write Esther in the first person?
Did I struggle to write Esther in the first person? No, because I cannot write in the third person. I started writing another novel, and I started writing it in the after this in the third person, because I was like, I have to show people I can do things differently, and I can't. It's just like, it's like wearing a costume. Like, I just feel more comfortable in the first person.
That's why he had to look and see if your name was Esther.
Right.
First person. I mean, that actually, I thought of the question when he asked his question, because of the sort of congruence between your persona here and the
Right.
I can just see that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I'm not, the book isn't about a 12-year-old Israeli boy or something where you'd be like, oh, she wrote a fictional novel. Instead, it's, I mean, you know, I am a young woman, and yeah, my dad read it, and he called me, and he was like, this is all fictional, right? I was like, yeah, it's totally fictional. And then he was like, but why did you make the dad character bald? And I was like, Dad, you're not bald, it's a character. You know, there's just this like, you know, it's a fine line. Yeah. I also, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Did you get any
Did they like read it and then want to talk to me about it? No. And like almost luckily, because the mom in the book is based on someone I worked for who was crazy, and I've had this fear. I haven't talked to her in years, and I've had this fear that she's going to read it. I mean, it's like, it's changed enough that it's not her, but I really did babysit this child, and the mom kind of wanted to be my best friend. It was like paying me to be her friend, and it was really intense. And she lives in Brooklyn, and so I kept waiting for her to show up at a reading, but she hasn't. But my friend Mark Brown, who's been my best friend since 3rd grade, not my best friend, but I've known him since 3rd grade, he read the book, and he was like, I'm not in there at all. And I was like, Mark, I can't put everyone I've ever known in the, and he's like, next book. And he's like coming up with this whole plot for me to write in my next book about him. Yeah. Yes?
Is there any resemblance to Dr. Freda Lippman?
As a character in the book? No, unfortunately. Maybe next book. Next book. No, she doesn't want that. Yes?
Do you have a particular favorite genre that you like to read?
That I like to read? A genre that I like to read? I find that I read whatever I'm interested in writing at the moment. So right now I'm working on a nonfiction project, so I've been reading a lot of memoirs to try to figure out, because I feel like I read to figure out how they do it. Some books I read, I mean, I still read for pleasure and like novels for plot and stuff, but I'm also reading at the same time books so that I can figure out how they've done it, and I read books a second time to figure out how they've done it. I would much rather read a book a second time than watch a movie a second time, because I don't know much about movies, and like once I know what happens, I'm like, I know what happens. But with books, there's, to me, because I know that's my skill of or whatever, with books, every time I read, I get another layer of how it works, and that's really exciting to me. Yes?
What do you do during dry spells of writing where you just kind of don't, you know you should be writing, but you don't feel like it?
Yeah, what do I do during dry spells? Well, I said a little of this at the beginning, that I kind of have to trick myself, and I found that switching genres, so if I feel like I really have to be writing this essay for this website right now, it's like, oh, a poem would be really nice. I end up doing the thing that I don't have to do, so maybe experimenting. I also like going to coffee shops and eavesdropping on people. I find some of the best material is like conversations you hear people having. So it looks like I'm like writing on my laptop, and really I'm just like recording conversation. Or like playing the game where you watch strangers walk by and you make up their name. You just think about, who's that person? Where are they going? Why do they look sad? What's their name? Do they have kids? And you can just play that. I mean, you can play it with a friend, and then you can write, a monologue or write something from them. Yeah. Yes?
Who's your inspiration?
What? Who's my inspiration as a writer? Who's my inspiration? My favorite writer is Lori Moore. She teaches in Wisconsin, and I think her work is so funny. And she wrote this novel that a lot of people have read, so I'll let you in on the secret. She wrote this novel called Anagrams, and it's 5 different pieces with the same character names in different configurations. So like in the first one, like the guy's in love with the girl and she doesn't love him back. And then later, like she's in love with him and he's cheating on her. So it's just like, it's mind-blowing. I've never read anything like it. And it's so funny, and I want to be like her. Yeah. Yes.
What was it like for you when you had finished acting school and you started writing, and you gradually realized that you started to have a passion for it? Were you kind of on the fence in a way in terms of whether you wanted to pursue it professionally, or was there a certain fear factor in there for you, or did you just decide to take the total plunge and just go for it?
My father is asking when I knew that I had a passion for writing, and did I hesitate or did I take the plunge? And I think the answer is that I took the plunge, because my whole life, I think it's like, if someone's like, oh, people don't do that, you can't do that, I'm like, watch this. I feel like, I'm motivated by spite and jealousy, which is probably not good, but I feel very determined to do what I want to do, and I feel like 100%. I mean, I was 100% committed to being an actress, and I moved to New York to go to an acting academy, and that was what I was going to do, and then I changed course. But once I changed course, it wasn't willy-nilly. It was like 100% this other thing, and then I stuck by it. And now I'm in the trenches. No. Yes.
What advice would you give to an aspiring young writer today?
What advice would I give to an aspiring young writer? Well, what was really helpful to me, I used to always say that I was self-taught because I took poetry class with Freda Lipman, and that's the only writing class I took for years, and then I took one nonfiction class. So I felt very proud that I taught myself to write. And then recently I realized that's not true at all, because all along I've had these friends with MFAs who've read my work and given me advice, and I've joined writing workshops. So all along I've had these mentors who I thought of as my friends, but really they've been mentoring me the whole time. And I think finding a true love reader is what I call it. But finding that one person who reads your work, and maybe you read their work, and they can give you constructive feedback, and also tell you that you're wonderful, but also tell you how to make your writing better, is the best thing you can have. For years, a poet and I emailed poems back and forth every day. He was older than me and more established, but he read my poems every day, and I read his poems. And just building those those relationships is absolutely necessary. And when I was writing the Fallback Plan, I lived in Albuquerque on a whim, and I was I have to find a writing workshop. So I went on meetup.com, and I looked for writing workshops in Albuquerque, and I found one. I showed up at this woman's house, and she was great. She had an MFA from the University of Minnesota, and there were these other people, and everyone dropped out of the workshop at the second week. I was the only one left with this woman, Ellen, but she ended up being my true love reader, and we met every week, and she read my book, and I read her book, and she was like, you're gonna send me 20 pages a week, and I was like, okay, which now I'm if I could be writing 20 pages a week. But I didn't know you couldn't write 20 pages a week, so I did, and I sent it to her, and that was that was the best. That was really the best. I like giving myself assignments. I feel that helps. And if you're stuck, it's even giving yourself a small assignment, write one page before you go get your coffee, well, you have to get your coffee first, but write one page before you call your friend or whatever. But I feel I need that person whipping me. It's a very masochistic pursuit, being a writer. Yes.
Sense of the suburbs in the Fallback Plan. I'm just curious, how you view the suburbs now living in Brooklyn. So the suburbs are kind of, artificial monolith full of strip malls, box stores, golf courses, and million-acre parking lots.
Uh-huh.
So does the book, I'm just curious how you view the suburbs. Is it a bad place?
No. When I lived in the suburbs growing up, I was I can't wait to get out of here. But now I'm very nostalgic for them. And since I wrote the book in Albuquerque, where nothing was green, I was thinking a lot about grass and green grass. There's a lot of scenes where May and Esther are in the grass. That's very romantic to me, the grass. My sister Hattie took my author photo in the grass of my parents' backyard. And I think I used to think all the exciting people are in the city because they chose to move to the city, and that's where it's all happening. But people in the suburbs, everyone has a story. And a lot of people weren't in the suburbs before they ended up in the suburbs. And it's kind of interesting to me, how did these people end up here? Where did they come from? What were they hoping to get from the suburbs, and did they get what they wanted? Yeah, so it's equally interesting to me. And there's a writer named Tom Perrotta, who I love, who writes about the Boston suburbs, and he's written Little Children, which is my favorite. He also wrote Election, which was that movie with Reese Witherspoon. Yeah. So I was reading his books while I was writing the Fallback Plan, because that's what I was interested in, the suburbs. And it's it's light satire, very funny. He's good. Maybe one more, if anyone has a burning question. No burning questions? Yes?
When you were at Northwestern, what did you study?
When I was at Northwestern, what did I study? I did not go to Northwestern. My character went to Northwestern. But it's funny, you should ask, because my publisher did a big push to college newspapers to review my book. And they sent out advance copies, which means before the book came out, they sent out uncorrected advance copies with a different cover that were just cheaply printed, and it says, this is an uncorrected proof, look at the real book before you publish your review. And this college newspaper wrote this review. They hated the book. And she was like, there were a lot of typos coming from a Northwestern grad. And yes. Yes, that's all. You get it. So yeah, that's that weird thing I've had where I kind of admit to it being autobiographical, but I also want everyone to know that I like made it up, you know, that it is invented. Because I still haven't graduated from college. I've lived at home 4 times, and I just wanted to find a tidy way to make a book. So I have her graduate from college, because that seemed very tidy to me. And I chose Northwestern because it was close to the setting of the book. Yeah. So thank you all again, and I will be happy to sign books if anyone would like. Thank you.